Welcome to 105 by 68 Power.
In this episode, we begin with a simple but often overlooked question. What does ownership really mean?
Right.
It is one of the most frequently used words in football, yet one of the least defined. This lack of definition does not just create confusion in conversation, it creates confusion in decisions.
And, ownership is often described using this really familiar and intuitive language. We talk about money, visibility, personality, or presence.
All the stuff you see on TV.
Exactly. These descriptions feel concrete, but they rarely explain how clubs actually function on a structural level.
When ownership is reduced to wealth or temperament, the discussion becomes emotional rather than structural.
It always does.
The real question is not how rich an owner is or how often they appear, but what role ownership plays inside the system of a club.
And to answer that question, ownership needs to be separated from the way it is commonly portrayed. Ownership is not a daily activity, and it is not defined by involvement.
So it's not about being hands-on.
Not at all. It is defined by position.
Ownership means ultimate authority.
That's the key.
And that authority does not just mean the power to approve or block decisions. It also means the power to define the objective of the club.
And that objective comes before structure, before people, before strategy.
Whether the club exists to win at any cost, to trade players, to remain solvent, to grow a brand, or to serve a wider purpose, that choice is made at ownership level.
Everything else is designed to serve that objective, even when it's never written down explicitly.
It is the final layer of decision-making in a club, the only layer that cannot be overruled.
Right.
Every other role, regardless of its importance, exists by delegation.
And this does not mean that owners make every decision, no. It means that every decision ultimately exists within a framework that ownership has the power to define, change, or remove.
Okay, so that framework is everything. But that's the part that gets a bit muddy, isn't it? I mean, we see these high-profile executives, and we assume they hold the final cards.
We do.
But what you're saying is their very existence is it's a function of the structure set up from above them.
It's all about designing a hierarchy to manage the complexity. The operational manager is there to make sure the process flows, to insulate the top strategic leader from all the day-to-day chaos.
And the really crucial part is that the ultimate authority, the board, the ownership, they're the ones who decided they needed those specific roles in the first place.
Yes, they formalize the delegation. All roles, every single one, exist by delegation.
So owners do not need to manage the club. They do not need to understand tactics, recruitment, or training methodology. Ownership is not a technical role, and it is not an operational one.
Ownership is a power role. Management, coaching, and sporting departments operate inside limits that are set above them.
Always.
Understanding this distinction is essential to understanding how clubs behave.
And if we're going to talk about those limits, the biggest one, the most crucial boundary that ownership sets, has to be financial capacity.
Absolutely.
That's the ultimate determinant of competitive potential.
Right. It almost doesn't matter how brilliant the rest of the club is.
It's the cold, hard reality of elite sport.
The data on this is just overwhelming. The higher the salary bill, which is purely an ownership decision, the higher the statistical chance of success. It's a fact. It sets the foundational limit.
And you can see this so clearly when you just compare clubs inside the same league.
The disparity is huge.
It's massive. You can have one club with almost 10 times the salary budget of another. 10 times.
So even if the management at that smaller club is the most innovative in the world, optimizing every single cent, their scope is just fundamentally constrained.
You can't manage your way out of a 10 times financial hole.
Not over the long run, no, it's almost impossible. And that forces internal collaboration. The sporting director and the CFO, they have to work hand in glove.
Because every transfer, every contract, it all circles back to the books.
Back to the health of the club as set by the board. If those financial limits are tight, the sporting goals have to change. You shift to player trading, not long-term stability.
Ownership rarely decides individual actions. Instead, it defines boundaries, how much can be spent, how much risk is acceptable, and how much instability can be tolerated.
And these boundaries are often invisible, but they are always present. Everything else happens inside them, even when no explicit instruction is given.
Ownership does not require constant presence to exercise control. Silence is not the same as absence.
There's also an important distinction to make here.
Formal power and effective power are not the same thing.
Ownership always retains formal authority. That never disappears.
But effective power, who actually shapes decisions day to day, depends on how much ownership chooses to delegate, supervise, or disengage.
When that gap becomes too large, you don't get autonomy. You get ambiguity about who is actually responsible.
Silence can be a form of control because the framework remains intact.
The rules are already set.
The rules are set.
Decisions continue to be made inside limits that have already been defined. If the owner has mandated that the club must generate $50 million in player sales this season,
then every single decision is already constrained by that.
the owner doesn't need to pick up the phone. The instruction is already there, silently guiding every choice.
And that framework also controls another critical resource, not money, but time. Time.
Yes.
Specifically, the length of patience you give to management to these big sporting projects.
Ownership controls time. The length of the runway that management gets is a direct reflection of ownership's tolerance for instability.
For short-term bumps in the road.
Exactly. Stability needs time, but time itself is never guaranteed. It's a variable.
And we see this all the time when projects that look sound just fail. And often it's not because the design was bad, but because that non-guaranteed factor, time, was withdrawn. And that withdrawal is purely an ownership decision.
If you want to see a very clear, structured version of this kind of silent, controlling framework, multi-club ownership networks make the logic visible.
So it doesn't matter if the owner is visible or not.
Ownership is not necessarily strong ownership. Invisible ownership is not necessarily weak ownership.
Presence is optional. Authority is not.
Right.
Intervention should not be confused with control.
The control is baked right into the system itself. Ownership shapes executive behavior. Executive behavior shapes governance. Governance shapes decision processes.
In that system is what we mean by governance.
Not people, not personalities.
But rules of decision-making. Who decides what, under which constraints, and with which consequences.
Once those rules are set, behavior follows.
And decision processes shape outcomes. This is that cascading effect. This is the chain of influence. And it means that problems we see on the pitch, like the series of bad signings, they often start way, way up higher.
Oh, absolutely. You see executives who just absorb all the public failure, when the real problem is the broken system they're forced to operate in.
We love to find one person to blame.
It's easier, but that person is often just reacting to flawed parameters that were set by the ownership structure in the first place.
Many failures attributed to coaches or executives originate at the ownership level.
But not because ownership is right or wrong, it's not a moral judgment.
No.
It's because ownership defines the system within which everyone else operates.
And that system extends beyond just players and strategy. It defines the club's physical infrastructure too.
Yes, this is where you see huge capital expenditure investments that totally redefine the club's financial model for decades.
So to understand a club, it is necessary to start from ownership, not from results, not from personalities, but from power.
Because ownership defines what is possible.
And what is not.
So if we know that the data shows this near-perfect correlation between success and the club's salary bill, a fundamental boundary set by ownership, we have to ask, is the role of management just to optimize a system that is fundamentally capped by the owner's investment, or is true sporting achievement always just defined by the financial capabilities set at the highest level?
So if you want to understand a football club, you don't start with results.
You don't start with coaches or players.
You start with ownership.
Because ownership defines what is possible long before the game ever reaches the pitch.
This is 105 by 68 Power.